Joyce Meyer, born Pauline Joyce Hutchison on June 4, 1943, in South St. Louis, came into the world during one of the most turbulent times in modern history. The Second World War was in full swing, casting a shadow over cities, homes, and families across the United States. Joyce's own family life, however, carried challenges far beyond what the world outside was experiencing. Her father, a machinist by profession, was drafted into the Army on the very day she was born. This immediate absence created a void that would shape the earliest years of her life. From the moment he left, Joyce's home was transformed into a place of uncertainty, tension, and fear. When he finally returned 3 years later, the man who walked back in the house was not the same as before. The experiences of war had left deep scars, altering his personality and bringing anger, distance, and instability into the family. His drinking increased, his words became harsher, and a cloud of fear hung over the household, changing the way Joyce experienced the world from a very young age. Money was already tight, as her family lived in a working-class neighborhood where every day brought new struggles. But the emotional weight of her father's trauma made everything worse. Inside the home, rules were strict, punishments were frequent, and small mistakes often led to intense consequences. Unlike other children who could play freely and feel safe at home, Joyce grew up in an environment where silence, obedience, and caution were necessary for survival. Her mother, already worn down by her own battles and by the weight of her husband's temper, was often too frightened to intervene. This silence, though understandable given her mother's circumstances, left Joyce feeling isolated and unprotected. She quickly learned that in her house, no one was coming to rescue her or make life easier. This sense of entrapment became the foundation of her early years, layering over her experiences like an invisible but heavy weight. Joyce's father's abusive behaviors extended beyond emotional manipulation. By the time she was 3 years old, Joyce later said, she was already experiencing sexual abuse, a horrifying reality that lived in the walls of her home. These early experiences of trauma and neglect left lasting marks on her sense of safety, trust, and self-worth. Despite the fear and pain, there were glimpses of hope and small sparks of light that eventually helped Joyce find a way to cope. Her mother's quiet strength, though limited, showed that even in the darkest moments, resilience existed. Joyce learned early that survival required inner strength and a sense of self-reliance. She began to develop a perspective on life shaped by fear, vigilance, and the need to protect herself emotionally. Yet even in the midst of these challenges, Joyce's mind and spirit began to look for something greater than the pain that surrounded her. At 9 years old, she discovered the Bible, opening its pages for the first time on her own. This quiet, personal engagement with Scripture became a source of comfort and guidance that helped her develop a new sense of hope. The words about love, forgiveness, and compassion offer her a mental and spiritual refuge from the darkness of her home life. Slowly, over time, she felt a small but growing strength emerge inside her. These early experiences of pain, fear, and faith laid the groundwork for the person she would eventually become, a woman who not only survived trauma, but also built a ministry to help millions of people facing their own struggles. Her childhood was marked by deep suffering, yet it was also the start of a spiritual journey that would define her life as Joyce Meyer moved from childhood into her teenage years. The shadows of her early life continued to shape every aspect of her experiences. The abuse she had endured at home did not stop, and in fact, became more complex and controlling. Her father's behavior escalated in ways that left her feeling trapped, confused, and ashamed. He used fear and manipulation to maintain control over her life, making her believe that speaking out would bring disaster upon her family and herself. Joyce's school years, which might have been a source of freedom and joy for most children, became yet another arena where her pain and trauma affected her ability to connect with peers. She often avoided inviting friends into her home, knowing what might happen if they were present. The experiences she faced at home created a sense of isolation that followed her everywhere, making her adolescence lonely and heavy. By the age of 12, Joyce believed she was worthless, not only because of the abuse, but also because of the constant verbal assaults that reinforced her father's power over her mind and spirit. The lack of support from her mother, who remained silent out of fear and shame, intensified her feelings of despair. She longed for someone to step in, to protect her, to validate her pain, but no one came. In the quiet moments when she sought comfort, she often found none, leaving her to carry her emotions and fears alone. Despite these challenges, Joyce's early connection to the Bible and her budding faith provided a small light in the darkness. At the age of 9, when she began reading Scripture on her own, she discovered passages that spoke of love, forgiveness, and hope. Those early encounters with God's Word created a private refuge where she could find some sense of peace and strength. Over time, the spiritual connection became a lifeline, helping her navigate the overwhelming difficulties at home. As she entered her teenage years, the trauma and emotional weight of her childhood began to influence her choices in relationships and life decisions. In her late teens, Joyce left her family home at the age of 18. With very little money and no real support system, she sought independence and a chance to rebuild her life. She took whatever jobs were available, including positions as a secretary in local offices, to support herself. The experience of leaving home was both liberating and frightening. She had escaped immediate danger, yet the anxiety and mistrust carved into her mind by years of abuse remained. These early experiences left Joyce cautious and guarded, especially in relationships. Her first marriage came quickly, driven by a desire for love, stability, and care she had never received at home. Unfortunately, this marriage was with a man she later described as a con artist. He lied, cheated, and stole, leaving her stranded on more than one occasion. On one memorable occasion, she found herself with nothing but a dime and a small carton of soda bottles while trying to survive in California. The marriage lasted only 5 years and ended in 1966, leaving Joyce to confront yet another painful chapter in her life. After her first divorce, she returned to her parents' home, a place already laden with old memories and emotional wounds. Despite the familiarity, the environment could not provide the safety or peace she had hoped for. Soon, she entered a second marriage, seeking the stability that had been absent for most of her life. Yet this relationship, too, brought emotional turbulence, leaving her wounded and uncertain. By the age of 22, Joyce had her first child, Laura. She moved into a tiny apartment, working full-time as a bank teller, while navigating the responsibilities of young motherhood. The weight of her past trauma, combined with new adult responsibilities, created immense pressure, and depression quietly entered her life. Counseling helped in some moments, but could not completely reach the roots of her pain. Despite the immense challenges, Joyce slowly began to reconnect with her faith. Over time, these small steps towards spiritual healing became the foundation of the resilience and inner strength that would later define her ministry. Her early adulthood, though marked by struggle, also became a period of gradual growth. Joyce learned lessons about independence, survival, and the importance of relying on both faith and inner determination. The hardships she endured in her youth and early adulthood, while painful, would later give her a unique ability to connect with others experiencing trauma, fear, or hopelessness. This period of life was crucial in shaping Joyce's understanding of human suffering and the power of hope, both of which would become central themes in her teachings and ministry. Joyce Meyer's journey into full-fledged ministry began in her early 30s, but the seeds were planted long before that. Her early connection to the Bible, discovered at the age of 9, had stayed with her through the pain, trauma, and challenges of adolescence and early adulthood. Even while coping with abusive relationships, depression, and the responsibilities of young motherhood, she maintained a quiet, growing faith that would eventually guide her toward a life of service and leadership. By her early 30s, Joyce had experienced enough of life's hardships to understand pain on a deep, personal level. She realized that many people struggle with emotional wounds, fear, and shame in ways similar to what she had endured. This awareness became the driving force behind her desire to help others. In 1976, at the age of 33, Joyce experienced a moment she would later describe as transformative. While driving to work one early morning, tired and frustrated, she was praying the same routine she had used for years. Then, something remarkable happened. She heard her name called 3 times, clearly and personally, filling her car with a presence that startled and thrilled her at the same time. Though she had been a Christian since childhood, Joyce felt empty during those years, almost lost in the monotony of her life and routine. That day was different. It felt like a voice reaching directly into the part of her heart that had been quiet for decades. The encounter left her almost euphoric, deeply touched, and profoundly changed. That morning marked a turning point when she shifted from being someone who quietly believed to someone who sought direction, action, and a life of purpose. Motivated by this experience, Joyce began taking small but meaningful steps toward helping others. She started by gathering a few co-workers during lunch breaks to study the Bible together. She consulted her pastor on what to study first, and he guided her toward a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. Opening it to John 1 verse 1, she began teaching and sharing what she was learning. Initially, the group was small, with only 25 to 30 people attending, but the participants returned faithfully every week, rain or shine. They appreciated Joyce's honesty and relatability. She did not present herself as someone perfect. She openly shared her struggles, failures, and lessons learned. Her transparency resonated with people who were dealing with difficulties in their own lives, and the group slowly grew. Joyce added another session on Thursday afternoons at a friend's house, which ran for 5 years. People were drawn not by flashy programs or grand promises, but by the simplicity and authenticity of her teaching. They could see that she had lived through pain and had come out stronger, and they believed that the principles she taught could help them, too. By the early 1980s, Joyce and her husband had joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri, a small church of only about 30 members. At first, she started a women's Bible study in her home, expecting a handful of participants. To her surprise, 115 women attended the first session. Within a short period, the group grew to 500 attendees weekly. Her energy, clarity, and willingness to speak about topics that many church leaders avoided attracted attention. Pastor Rick Shelton recognized her potential and invited her to fill in on Sunday services. Her testimony of surviving abuse and finding healing through faith resonated deeply with the congregation. She counseled people carrying wounds similar to her own and co-led a 15-minute radio segment alongside Pastor Shelton, focusing on emotional healing through Scripture. The radio segment planted seeds for something much larger, creating a foundation for what would eventually become a nationwide ministry. Joyce's early ministry was characterized by honesty, vulnerability, and an unwavering commitment to helping people confront their struggles. She spoke openly about fear, shame, trauma, and the internal battles that many face silently. Her ability to connect personal experiences with practical, faith-based guidance made her stand out from other religious leaders at the time. The authenticity and relatability of her approach became a hallmark of her ministry, laying the groundwork for the explosive growth that would follow in later decades. By the mid-1980s, the demand for Joyce's teaching had grown so large that she resigned from her associate pastor role to establish her own independent nonprofit ministry, Life in the Word. Starting from her home, she handled letters, counseling requests, and tape orders, relying on donations from listeners to fund the work. Though small in the beginning, this ministry laid a solid foundation for what would eventually become one of the largest and most influential Christian organizations in the world. Her journey from a young girl facing unimaginable abuse to a woman taking her first steps into public ministry is a testament to resilience, faith, and determination. Joyce Meyer's early ministry demonstrates how personal experience, honesty, and a desire to help others can transform pain into purpose, setting the stage for the remarkable influence she would have in the decades to come. By the early 1980s, Joyce Meyer's ministry had begun to expand far beyond the walls of her home and local Bible studies. The women's group she led had grown exponentially, demonstrating that her message of hope, healing, and practical faith resonated deeply with people who were struggling in silence. Recognizing the opportunity to reach more individuals, Joyce began to explore broader platforms to share her teachings. One of the first major expansions came through radio. In 1983, at the age of 40, she launched a small program called Life in the Word. The show started on a single station in St. Louis, but the impact was immediate. Her voice carried a distinct authenticity and emotional depth, allowing listeners to feel understood, seen, and encouraged. Unlike many religious programs of the time, which focused mainly on doctrine or prosperity, Joyce openly addressed real-life struggles. She discussed topics such as fear, shame, trauma, and depression, issues that were often considered taboo in Christian circles. This honesty set her apart and quickly drew attention. Within a short period, her program expanded to 6 radio stations across the Midwest, reaching cities like Chicago and Kansas City. The feedback from listeners was overwhelming. People wrote letters sharing that they felt comforted and validated for the first time. Some said they had experienced abuse or trauma in their past and had never spoken about it openly. Joyce's willingness to share her own life, including painful experiences, helped others realize they were not alone. The growing popularity of her radio program laid the foundation for her transition into television. By the mid-1980s, she began creating short televised segments alongside her church, where she shared lessons on emotional healing, practical faith, and overcoming life's obstacles. These segments caught the attention of broader audiences and further established her reputation as a relatable and compassionate teacher. In 1985, recognizing the increasing demand for her work, Joyce formally established Life in the Word as an independent nonprofit ministry. Initially, it was a small operation run from her home, with funding coming entirely from listener donations, which totaled about $50,000 in the first year. She and her husband, Dave, who took on the role of business manager, worked tirelessly to manage letters, tape orders, counseling requests, and the growing administrative demands. The ministry's growth was rapid, fueled by Joyce's authenticity, practical guidance, and ability to connect with people on a deeply personal level. By the late 1980s, the organization had expanded to employ a small team, creating a foundation for more structured operations and future growth. Around this time, Joyce also released Battlefield of the Mind as a radio series. This program focused on mental and emotional struggles that many people face silently, including negative thought patterns, depression, fear, and trauma. The series quickly became popular, selling tens of thousands of cassette tapes, and helped listeners take back control of their thoughts and emotions. This radio success would later serve as the basis for one of her best-selling books, which reached millions worldwide. Joyce's ability to combine personal testimony with practical spiritual advice allowed her teachings to resonate with a broad audience. By 1993, she had made the leap to television with Enjoying Everyday Life, which began on WGN-TV and BET as a 30-minute local show. The program's reach expanded quickly due to her emotional, relatable style. Viewers appreciated how she openly discussed her past struggles and the lessons she learned from them. Unlike other televangelists who often focus on prosperity alone, Joyce brought depth, vulnerability, and honesty to the screen. Within a few years, her show was airing in 20 countries, and she became a recognizable figure in Christian households around the world. Her rise on television was marked not only by her ability to share spiritual guidance, but also by her courage to confront difficult topics that many others avoided. By connecting her own life experiences with the challenges faced by her viewers, Joyce created a platform that allowed millions to feel heard, understood, and encouraged. Her work on radio and television established her as one of the most influential voices in modern Christianity, setting the stage for a global ministry that would continue to grow in the decades to follow. As Joyce Meyer's ministry grew in reach and influence throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, so did the scope of her operations. By 1997, her ministry had moved into a new $20 million headquarters in Fenton, Missouri, which included a production studio capable of creating over 300 episodes of Enjoying Everyday Life each year. This facility became the heart of her work, allowing her teachings to be broadcast not only across the United States, but also internationally, reaching millions of viewers in multiple countries and languages. The ministry's infrastructure reflected Joyce's commitment to accessibility and quality. She and her team continued to focus on emotional healing, practical faith, and helping individuals overcome trauma. However, with growth came scrutiny. Some critics began questioning the use of funds, particularly in light of the ministry's significant annual donations, which at the time exceeded $100 million. Reports surfaced about high-cost items, such as a $10 million Learjet used for ministry travel and luxurious office furniture, including the infamous $23,000 marble commode. These details sparked debates about transparency and the proper use of ministry funds. Joyce and her team addressed these criticisms by emphasizing that over 90% of donations were directed toward charitable work and outreach programs. In addition to operational expansion, Joyce Meyer Ministries also focused heavily on charitable efforts. In 2000, she and her husband opened the St. Louis Dream Center, a 100-acre campus dedicated to serving people affected by trauma, addiction, and poverty. The center provided addiction recovery programs, food assistance, after-school support, and housing for men who were rebuilding their lives. The Dream Center helped more than 5,000 people annually, showcasing the tangible impact of her ministry on the local community. Internationally, her organization also contributed to disaster relief and humanitarian aid. Following the devastating 2010 Haiti earthquake, which claimed over 200,000 lives, her ministry distributed $5 million worth of food, water, and medical supplies to nearly 50,000 survivors. They also built hundreds of homes in Miracle Village, providing permanent shelter for Haitian families. These projects demonstrated that the ministry was not just about preaching, but also about practical, life-changing assistance. At the same time, financial oversight remained a critical focus due to earlier controversies. In 2009, the ministry joined the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, ECFA, which required stricter audits and public transparency. Reports from the ECFA confirmed that most of the ministry's money went to outreach and charity programs, reflecting a commitment to accountability. The organization also made internal reforms, including creating a board primarily composed of members not related to Joyce or her husband, ensuring more independent oversight. Yet, the financial criticisms did not completely subside. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch's 2003 expose highlighted Joyce's salary of $900,000, her husband's earnings of $450,000, and the purchase of multiple high-value homes using ministry funds. Critics question whether such expenditures align to the values of a nonprofit religious organization. A 2007 investigation by Senator Chuck Grassley, known as the Grassley 6 Probe, examined Joyce and 5 other televangelists for potential misuse of donations, including private jets, foreign accounts, and luxurious spending. While the investigation found no illegal activity in Joyce Meyer Ministries, it underscored the intense public scrutiny that accompanied large ministries. Joyce responded by emphasizing transparency and continued reforms, including publishing annual financial reports and implementing more rigorous oversight procedures. Despite controversies, the ministry's charitable work continued to flourish. Between 2015 and 2020, they quietly funded over 100 adoptions for children who had survived abuse, covering legal fees, counseling, and family support. Each adoption represented a new beginning, and Joyce's team chose to focus on action rather than publicity. Similarly, partnerships with organizations like International Justice Mission led to the rescue of over 1,000 victims of human trafficking, offering safe housing and legal assistance. Joyce often explained that her own history of abuse and trauma shaped her dedication to helping vulnerable children and adults. These charitable initiatives illustrated how the ministry translated faith into tangible assistance, impacting countless lives both locally and globally. The combination of ministry growth, media outreach, and humanitarian efforts positioned Joyce Meyer as one of the most influential Christian leaders of her time, even as financial controversies and public scrutiny remained constant challenges. Her ability to balance outreach, personal testimony, and transparency while addressing criticism became a defining feature of her leadership, demonstrating resilience, accountability, and a commitment to serving others despite ongoing challenges. By the mid-2020s, Joyce Meyer had firmly established herself as a global Christian leader, yet no ministry, regardless of its size or influence, was immune to controversy. In 2024, a major scandal erupted involving Dyer Television Network, where Joyce's program Enjoying Everyday Life had aired for almost 2 decades. Journalist Julie Roy reported that Joni Lamb, the network's president, had allegedly ignored warnings about sexual abuse involving her own granddaughter between 2020 and 2021. Internal documents and family sources indicated that repeated reports were dismissed or minimized, leaving the situation unresolved for months. The news spread rapidly, sparking public outrage and raising questions about accountability in religious organizations. Joyce Meyer, who had built a ministry focused on healing, integrity, and protecting the vulnerable, found the situation deeply personal. She had spoken openly for decades about surviving abuse and supporting victims, and the Dyer controversy directly conflicted with her values. In January 2025, she made the difficult decision to pause broadcasts on Dyer TV, publicly stating that she could not continue airing her program on a network facing serious allegations. This move was seen by many as a courageous stand, reflecting her commitment to ethical leadership over convenience or popularity. Joyce's decision also highlighted her concern for the victims, as she insisted that law enforcement and child protection authorities handle the case without interference. While leaving Dyer meant temporarily losing access to a long-established audience, it also opened the door for a ministry to embrace newer platforms. Joyce quickly shifted her program to Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN, Lifetime, and YouTube. These platforms allowed her to continue daily teachings while reaching an increasingly younger, digitally savvy audience. On YouTube, she introduced live Q&A sessions, devotionals, and interactive spaces for open discussions about faith, mental health, and personal struggles. This digital expansion helped Joyce maintain and even grow her audience, despite losing approximately 10% of viewers from Dyer TV. By late 2025, her programs were firmly established on TBN and Lifetime, while her online presence flourished. The transition demonstrated adaptability and a forward-thinking approach, showing that traditional television was no longer the sole avenue for ministry outreach. Meanwhile, the Dyer scandal continued to unfold publicly. Jonathan Lamb, Joni's son, accused his mother of financial misconduct, including using a Dyer credit card to pay for a $100,000 honeymoon in 2023 and maintaining secret payroll records. Although Dyer denied the allegations, court documents revealed that salary decisions have been influenced by family directives following the death of a senior executive. Jonathan was ultimately fired, leading to additional public dispute